Chapter 25. An Unhappy Compromise. Ironically, after more than 6 hours of sweating out negotiations conducted with numerous governments through Bourbonnais' top political contacts, tiny Israel was the only nation that was willing to admit Ari for immigration. And that breakthrough came only at the last minute, when Ari brought up the possibility and was finally willing to admit what he had spent a lifetime trying to deny and forget, that he was probably a Jewish survivor of the Nazi Holocaust. Actually, it had been Abdul's repulsive anti-Israel rhetoric, so reminiscent of the Nazi slogan, Deutschland Erwache, verrecke, that is, Germany awake, death to the Jews, that had so recently stirred long-suppressed memories. Israeli computers were able to verify enough of the story Ari told Bourbonnais to convince them of its authenticity. Yes, there had been one young Jewish couple of record, a Jacob and Elizabeth Thalberg, beloved school teachers, living in the small village in East Germany where Ari had been born and raised by his foster parents. And yes, it was known that the Thalbergs had been taken from the village sometime early in 1944 and had perished at Auschwitz just before its liberation by the Russians in January 1945. There was no record of any children born to the young couple, but now there seemed little doubt that Ari had been their only child. And so the good news came at last when Bourbonnais finally hung up the phone and announced, "Papers are being drawn up in the name of Ari Thalberg to allow you to emigrate to Israel. As a Holocaust survivor, they could not turn you down. Until then, you'll be kept in protective custody." Bourbonnais pushed a button on his desk. The door swung open, and 4 plainclothes officers entered. Pulling snub-nosed revolvers from shoulder holsters, they advanced warily toward Ari. "Put those guns away," snapped Bourbonnais nervously. "He'll go with you. Anybody who lays a finger on him is finished." "What is this?" protested Ari. "You'll be treated like a king," came the smooth answer, "a guest of the French government until you're safely aboard El Al and on your way to Israel. You know we can't have you floating around out there." "When do I get my personal belongings? From my office at the university and from my apartment?" "Everything will be packed and shipped to Israel at our expense. You don't have to lift a finger." "You'd better let me make some phone calls. Right now," demanded Ari. "That won't be necessary." "My students, my contract, the university, I can't just vanish. Someone's going to have to make an explanation." "Roger has all that under control," countered Bourbonnais. "Right?" Roger nodded. "I've already scheduled a press conference. Everyone will be notified." Nicole was nursing her 2-week-old baby and watching the late evening news when, to her surprise, she saw Ari being interviewed by the Israeli Consul General. The brief discussion revealed the recent discovery that Dr. Hans Müller, a popular professor of political science at the Sorbonne and head of that department for the past 5 years, was in fact Dr. Ari Thalberg, a Jewish survivor of the Nazi Holocaust. The discovery had been made quite by accident only that afternoon. As a result, Dr. Thalberg had been invited by the Israeli government to immigrate to that country, was leaving his post at the university, and would be flying to Israel within a few days. The news that Ari was Jewish detonated in Nicole's consciousness like a bomb blast. Was that why he had such an aversion to Jesus Christ? How little she really knew about this enigmatic man. She called later that evening to wish him well in his new identity and country, only to discover that the phone in his apartment had been disconnected. The next day, she called his secretary at the Sorbonne. "Michelle, this is Nicole. I'm trying to get in touch with Dr. Müller. I called his apartment last night, but the phone was disconnected." "We've been trying to reach him, too. He hasn't been in touch with us at all. The only thing we've heard was the announcement on the news last night. If you find out anything, let us know." Worried now, Nicole phoned the Israeli embassy. It was another stonewall job. Not one of the various persons to whom she was referred would admit to the slightest knowledge of either a Hans Müller or an Ari Thalberg. At last she reached someone who admitted to knowing something, but was not giving out any information. "I'm sorry, but Dr. Thalberg is in seclusion. It was a shock to discover his Jewish roots and the name and fate of his parents, and he has requested not to be disturbed." But I was his closest friend, protested Nicole. If that is the case, I'm sure he'll be in touch with you when he's ready. Well, when is he leaving? I could at least see him off at the airport. We don't have that information, and if we did, we couldn't give it out. Good day, mademoiselle. Nicole was now convinced that something had gone horribly wrong. She sat by the phone, pondering what to do. Then she remembered the emergency number Ari had given her months ago, found it in her purse, and dialed. Mr. Dunn is in conference with clients all day, his secretary announced. Could someone else help you? Tell Mr. Dunn, said Nicole in a conspiratorial voice, that I have some information about Ari Thalberg that would be of great interest to him, and I must talk to him immediately. Roger was on the phone almost immediately. You have some information? To whom am I speaking? And how did you get my name and number? Mr. Dunn, began Nicole in a cheerful Pollyanna voice, we've met only once that I recall, but Ari has told me a great deal about you. Ari gave you this number? And who are you? I'm Nicole. I lived with Ari for 6 years. Oh, yes, I remember. Roger's tone became guarded. You had some information about him that you wanted to give me? Before I get to that, Ari has disappeared, and I think you know where he is. I saw him on television just last night. And so did I, but he's not at his apartment. His phone has been disconnected. The university doesn't know where to find him. You know more than I do. Let's not play games, Roger. I wasn't born yesterday. I happen to be one of those persons, and I know there are several others, to whom Ari gave a packet of documents that I know you don't want to be made public. And of course I won't do so except in the event of Ari's death or disappearance. There was a prolonged silence. You know what I'm talking about? Persisted Nicole. Yes, go ahead. I wouldn't be so stupid as to tell you this without having made careful provision for those papers to be kept in a safe place and to be published in spite of my death or disappearance, if and when the conditions Ari set forth are met. What do you want from me? I want to see Ari. That's impossible. Then I have no choice except to follow Ari's instructions and to release this material. He's not dead, declared Roger with finality. Why should I take your word for that? Dead or alive, he has disappeared. His instructions state explicitly that if he should disappear, he hasn't disappeared. There's no reason, unless I have some proof, said Nicole icily. I have no option except to follow Ari's instructions and release. He's leaving tomorrow morning, interrupted Roger. There was a long pause. At last he conceded. Okay, here's what we'll do. Go to Orly Sud at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, and you can see Ari. Where? At the El Al gate? El Al is not marked, for security reasons. Just wait outside the main entrance. I'll find you. I'll be there.